everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of the Crown Report. My name is Brittany. It is Tuesday, October 28th, and we do have a lot going on within the royal world. Of course, the pressure is intensifying on Prince Andrew. There is desires for him to move out of Royal Lodge, which have been around for a long time. There's also stories about whether or not he wants Sarah to have her own place as well. Was that his idea, the palace's idea? So we're getting conflicting stories. And we also have sort of the bigger question of all of this is how this has whole discussion over Andrew has become a bit of a witch hunt. And some are even saying that Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie should be caught up in the melee. And some are even saying that their finances and everything should be raked over with a fine tooth comb. How does this situation with Andrew can and should impact the York girls? Because obviously they're adults, they're not involved in all their parents' nefarious doings, and maybe not into any of it at all. But it does raise some really fascinating questions. Of course, we'll go into all the latest with Andrew. We also have some updates about Magnusberg Holmby of Norway, the son of Norway's crown princess. He is once again in rehab. So will it work this time? I don't know. We also have sort of an interesting story growing out of Denmark about frustrations over the holiday king. And so this is Frederik. Frederik will also go over a little bit of the Princess of Asturias awards there in Spain. We also have Frederik and Mary over there in Latvia for their state visit. So many royal things going on. So let's go ahead and begin here with sort of an interesting little bit. I pulled this out earlier that Charles is getting a bit heckled about Prince Andrew. And so it seems like this has been largely, you could say, orchestrated by the Republic movement. So in many ways, they obviously had their agenda they want to push. But let's listen to how Charles dealt with some of the heckling he had earlier. I think this was yesterday.
How long have you known about Andrew and Epstein? Have you asked the police to cover up for Andrew? Have you asked the police to cover up for Andrew?
So I love this because we have this woman right here who people in this crowd, or at least the Republic people there, want to obviously kind of annoy and kind of pester Charles. But this one woman's like, I am here to see the king and shake his hand, and you are ruining this for me. So bravo to her.
What do you think? Should the MPs be allowed to debate the lawyers in the House of Commons?
So he did have to sort of move away from the crowd because of sort of the heckling he was getting. Again, this is from the Republic movement. And so I think this is just so important for people to sort of kind of get a stand, is that there is a frustration over Andrew. Charles cannot escape this. I'll have a whole video going over basically how Andrew and Harry are really Charles's make it or break it moment. The British royal family generally has an issue with putting, I think, their heads in the sand and sort of avoiding the bigger issues and hoping they blow over at some point. And in some situations, that does work. You know, obviously, never complain, never explain. But I don't think that particularly works here. So I think that's a really important distinction to go over. And what I, again, found really interesting is that the idea for this video, just overall, my thought was, when it comes to Andrew, and I will state this and preface this as we go over all the Andrew stuff, some of it has become sort of a heightened witch hunt, that people are just searching for people to devour in this because they want to enact vengeance. They want to enact different things against Andrew, punishment or what have you, because of what Virginia Giuffre alleges. And I say alleges because we have no concrete evidence of what actually occurred between her and Andrew. Were they intimate? Probably, definitely. But beyond that, like the legalities of everything, we don't know enough about. And I see some people, and it has been sort of charged into this fact where people are having an emotional response rather than thinking through things analytically. Because this is, in addition to obviously some very troubling behavior, we also had the fact that a lot of people are getting caught up in this unnecessarily. And I think this especially goes with the York girls, obviously Charles as well, William. Everybody's sort of getting caught up in this mess. And this was a mess 30, 40 years in the making. This mess started with Queen Elizabeth. She did not get this taken care of, and now it's impacting Charles. And I feel like Charles is trying the same route that Queen Elizabeth did in a lot of ways. And this is not going to work. I do think there needs to be things in place, things that are addressed. But honestly, my suggestion would be to evaluate more regarding Andrew's financial improprieties with his role as a trade envoy. I feel like the actual crimes in some ways have been sort of covered up by the melee over Virginia Giuffre. Obviously, I haven't read Virginia's book yet. I do plan to. But again, just from a legality standpoint and everything like that, there is no way to sort of evaluate her witness statements because she is now deceased. There's no way really to bring any charges against Andrew. And I don't know if he did anything illegal with her actually overall. It's quite a situation where it goes back 20 plus years. It's really hard for cases in regards to that to actually get prosecuted because obviously memories are less reliable the further you get away from an event. So I just want to preface that here because I feel like one of the things that's getting really caught up in all of this is Beatrice and Eugenie. And when I read Andrew Lowney's book on Andrew and Sarah, it was sort of clear that Eugenie and Beatrice have utilized the connections that their father has made through his role as a trade envoy to help themselves in their own professional endeavors. But they are not working royals and they have never been working royals. So I saw somebody comment on this, and I'm sure it was a news story that William was demanding to see basically Beatrice and Eugenie's personal financial records and stuff to see if there was anything improper, seeing if there was something improper going on. But really, at the end of the day, they're not working royals because the distinction between working royals and non-working royals is a working royal represents the UK government. A member of the British royal family does not. They do reflect on the government and they do reflect on the royal family and the royal family's connection to the government. But if you're not a working royal, technically, you don't represent the British government in an official capacity. So both of them have private careers. Now, I think both of them, especially Beatrice, would have loved to have been working royals, but Charles put the kibosh on that. I think probably a little bit too soon because he's really relying on Harry and his wife sticking around. And obviously that did not happen. But Beatrice and Eugenie, I think, are unnecessarily getting caught up in this melee. And I don't think they deserve it. Did Beatrice and Eugenie get weird things from their father's nefarious dealings in the Middle East and various, I think, Central Asian countries? Yes, I think one of them got a necklace, another one got like a big cash, like dump into their account or something like that. But how much of the girls actually had control over that, if that did happen, I think is nebulous. I don't think necessarily that was actually true. Not sure how much of that obviously is true and how much the girls knew. We probably will never fully know. But I just feel like it's sort of sad to see them get caught up in all these things, even though, as far as we're aware, they've really led, without being part of the working royal fold, fairly stable lives as professionals. And this is not to say it as well that no other royal makes money off their connections, because Zara Philip Tyndall, she's gotten sort of brand ambassadorships, I think, based upon her connections to the royal family. A lot of it obviously has to do with her equestrianism as well. But Peter Phillips, definitely 150%. If you recall this story, maybe you don't, maybe you're newer to royal watching, but Peter Phillips, who is the firstborn grandchild of Queen Elizabeth II, he is the son of Princess Anne. He made money. He actually sold the pictures from his wedding to Hello Magazine and didn't tell anyone that. And so we have sort of candid pictures of Catherine and Chelsea. We have candid pictures of the Queen, and all of them didn't know that those pictures would be featured in Hello Magazine. So 150% people who are connected to the royal family do make money off of it in probably ways they shouldn't. So this is not simply a York issue. This is a bigger issue. But I think it's unfair to smear both of the girls with these charges because I just don't think necessarily that they have done really anything too improper. Now, obviously, we don't know everything, and some people just hate Beatrice and Eugenie for alleged ties, obviously, to Harry and Meghan. Eugenie was rather close to Harry. I don't know why it would be a problem to be close to a family member. And then we also have, obviously, Beatrice as well. What was Beatrice's thing? Oh, some people have said she was rude to Catherine, or maybe that was Eugenie. I don't know. I've heard it both ways, that all the three of the girls weren't necessarily super nice to each other in the early days. There's always been an allegation that Beatrice was invited to a party by Catherine, and Catherine didn't tell her it was fancy dress. This was the skating party, so it was like a disco theme or 80s theme or something like that. And so I think that when it comes to the girls, I think they get unnecessarily smeared because their parents are not great people. It is perfectly possible to have not great parents raise good kids. Weirdly, that does happen. Or the kids who decide to not follow their parents' example. Now, again, we don't know everything, but at the same time, I feel like it's just sort of nasty where people get to when it comes to the girls. And so this is the article in the Telegraph that says Emily Mightless claims Prince William threatened to remove Beatrice and Eugenie's titles. Broadcasters' allegations of royal ultimatum for cousins sparks denials from palace insiders. So I don't think this is a particularly well titled title, but I don't think it's I agree here that the Telegraph is definitely taking from both sides and saying this story isn't true. But again, there's just such a desire to smear the girls because of their connections to their parents. Again, without really any concrete evidence, all of their stuff could be on the up and up. Yes, they use their dad's connections, but everything they've done could be on the up and up. But people hate Andrew so much, they hate Sarah so much, they're extending it to the girls as well. And as far as we're aware, the girls have led pretty professional, non-compromised lives, especially in connection to their father. They haven't made always great choices because Beatrice was definitely part of that Nightline interview. But this says Emily has claimed that the Prince of Wales threatened to remove Princess Beatrice and Eugenie's titles if they did not persuade their father to leave Royal Lodge, despite no such meeting taking place. Matless, the former BBC journalist who interviewed Prince Andrew in 2019, told listeners of her podcast that Prince William met with his cousins to issue an ultimatum last week. But sources close to both the prince and the princesses deny the existence of any meeting. The prince also does not have the power to remove their titles or ask Parliament to do so. And that is correct. It is correct that he doesn't really have the power to do anything, nor, especially when it comes to finances, does he have the right to dig through their personal finances, because they haven't been charged with doing anything improper or illegal. You have to have reason to do that. You can't just do that because you don't like their dad and you find their dad questionable. I mean, I'm sure many of you listening on here has been a sort of, let's say, has family members who have done terrible things, and you don't want their terrible things to define you. So I would say extend that same mentality to the York girls as well. We don't have any indication they've done anything, let's say, nefarious. Buckingham Palace has made it clear that the status of Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie has not changed since Prince Andrew announced he would no longer be using his Duke of York title. Palace sources have said the girls, as they are known in royal circles, are wholly unaffected and will be welcomed to family occasions, including Christmas as usual. Princess Beatrice is currently working overseas. And I had not heard that before, so I found that really interesting. But I love the statement here. The girls are unaffected, as they should be. The sins of the parents should not affect the sins of the children and will be welcomed to any family occasions, including Christmas, as usual. So, when it comes to this family dynamic, that has not changed when it comes to the York girls and the mainstream royal family. And I think that's an incredibly good thing. I think it's really, really good that the girls are not ostracized just because of their parents. I think that is a very good, healthy step to take. Now, if there are, let's say, allegations in the future, there's something concrete or whatever, and that needs to be adjusted again or that needs to be reviewed, obviously that can happen. But at this point, there's no real evidence. I feel like it's completely improper to smear the girls in this way. And William has a lot bigger fish to fry. And I don't think he's that concerned about the York girls, really. His bigger issue, of course, is going to be Harry and Meghan. That's his much, much bigger issue than Beatrice and Eugenie. I don't think he's that concerned about them. And of course, Andrew as well. And so we also had the update that Royal Lodge, where Catherine and William are going to be moving, is going to be open fairly quickly as well. But I also wanted to point out something too, if you hadn't really thought about it, and I sort of lost my train of thought. But when it comes to the girls, I think William, so when it comes to the royal titles in particular, because some people do want the girls' titles to be stripped, or maybe even their places in the line of succession. So I think it's really interesting. So how does that compare to Harry and Meghan and their children? It is different in a couple ways. Number one, Beatrice and Eugenie are now both in basically their mid-30s. So they have been born with these titles and they've lived with these titles their entire lives at this point. And so it makes sense for me in my mind for them to keep them because that is how they've grown up. That's how they've lived their whole lives. They're now adults and they go by Beatrice York and Eugenie York in their professional endeavors. So to me, I don't really find that to be super problematic. The difference with Harry and Meghan's kids and also their places in the line of succession, I think they should keep them because they haven't done anything to not deserve them at this point. And they've set a track record that has been fairly good and consistent. And obviously the family knows more. I think both of the girls have, especially Beatrice, she's really into history. So I think she has a great appreciation for the royal family. But let's talk about, let's say, Harry and Meghan and their kids. And the big difference there, I feel like, for them in a lot of ways is that Harry and Meghan's kids, number one, they're super young. So yes, they haven't even had these titles their entire lives. I was about to say that, and I was like, oh, no, wait. They only got them a couple of years ago when Charles became king. We also had the added aspect of they don't even live in the UK. And so you have to have, as sort of a royal, kind of look at this and evaluate this and go, well, they're obviously so young. They're not really attached to their titles in the same way. They haven't been able to really use them in any particular way. And so because of that, like it's only on stationery that Meghan, demanded was created. There's no real reason for them to be Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet. We can strip them of their titles and their father and their place in the line of succession. And because they're so young and everything, I think this needs to be done now rather than waiting. Because if you wait, that argument becomes harder to make. But I think right now, you can definitely make the argument. I think Harry has done enough damage. I think because the kids no longer live in the UK, no longer have a connection to the royal family. I mean, they've never even been to Christmas. They've never even been to New Year's. They've never been to, any of the big sort of British holidays. And so they have no connection to their family, Trooping the Color or anything in that way. And so because of that, this should not be a hard decision to make. Whereas the girls are fully integrated into the family. They obviously have great relations with a lot of their cousins. And I feel like it would be sort of cruel to strip them at this point. I think it was a little bit cruel for Queen Margrethe to do it to her older grandchildren because they were sort of in their early 20s when she stripped and downgraded their titles. Now, obviously, she can downgrade them, but when it comes to Beatrice and Eugenie, they can be downgraded, but I just don't feel like at this point they were born blood princesses. They've been that their entire lives. They haven't done anything. Just because of what their father has done doesn't necessarily mean, because they themselves as adults have established themselves outside of their father, I don't think necessarily that they should be punished because of their dad. And I do think what's kind of sad as well in many ways is that this whole conundrum, and yes, this is entirely Andrew and Sarah created, I'm sure has resulted in a lot of strain on Beatrice, Eugenie, their families, their kids, their husbands. And I find that to be really sad, because the York family, you could say a lot of things about them, but they tended to be pretty close. Though I have now more questions about that. Was it more for truth, or was it more for like because they really wanted to, at least when it came to Andrew and Sarah, or was it more for convenience because she wanted to save money? But when it comes to the girls and their relationships with each other, their parents, their own partners and children, I'm sure all of that has been strained quite a bit. And I find that quite sad. And it's sort of an example of how, for lack of a better word, sins within the family can, yes, maybe the impact doesn't happen back when Andrew was, allegedly having a potential relationship with Virginia Giuffre, no matter how tenuous it was. Yes, it didn't happen then, but that sin had an impact years from now. And now I can't think of anything other than there's a lot of stress in this family, a lot of tension, and it didn't need to be there. And again, I think some of this goes back to Queen Elizabeth. If Queen Elizabeth had addressed this 30 years ago, addressed his behavior 3 decades ago, her granddaughters would not be in this mess. And again, I think this is a great example to King Charles of why you have to deal with these problems. Not just wait for them to go away, not just hope things get better. No, no, no. You have to deal with them now. Because if the Harry Meghan situation is not dealt with now either, they'll be dealing with another Andrew and Sarah down the line. Because I would bet you, as the coffers begin to dry up for Meghan, and I believe they will at some point, and she'll probably overextend, that things will get bad and they may have their own sort of Jeffrey Epstein situation. So that's just something to keep in mind. I like to kind of provide people, I guess, with a bit of a different perspective and try to get things to focus on sort of a lot of things and really try to think through things. And so we do have a question from Gretchen here. Says, I wonder if all this stuff with Andrew will mean that the York dukedom gets idled. If you were Louis or whoever in the next generation, who would want it? That's a great question, because technically it should go to Louis, but it might not. It is a prestigious title for the second son of the king, and that has been the case for a long time. So it's been that way for centuries. So I have a hard time believing that they would not sort of put that in stay indefinitely. I think that's a definite possibility, although I would find it quite sad. So, Annabelle says, Brittany, with all due respect, you don't have the information about the York girls' finances. Say whatever. They are not culpable of any fiscal impropriety. Yes, but you don't have any either. So, best to think people are innocent before presuming guilt. And I have read all of Andrew Lowney's book. And yes, there were definitely some questionable things that the girls have done. But at the same time, I tend to want to give people the benefit of the doubt rather than participating in a witch hunt. That's sort of how I try to operate on things. It tends to go a bit better if you do things that way. That's what I've experienced, is that if you look through things with a cautious eye rather than going directly to, oh, they must be guilty because their parents are, or because of this or that, you'll probably get better. Am I perfect at always following that? No. But I think in this case, we have enough evidence and enough of a long-term, let's say, public relationship with Beatrice and Eugenie to not think, I think, that they are, let's say, being very improper with everything, or that they've somehow been financially improper like their father. Have they, I think, benefited from some of his connections? Yes, but so have a lot of royals. So I don't think they're immune from that either. But we did have a couple things here real quick. We did have Carol who gifted one Royal News Network membership. Thank you so much, Carol. And we do have Christina who gifted a Royal News Network membership as well. So thank you so much, ladies. And Carol has also given a super chat that said, I think we needed to remove all titles from the Sussex's senior York, then work on transparency, financials. There needs to be a code of conduct. Yes. So in the video that I will hopefully upload later this week, I do argue definitely for some sort of standard of conduct that is signed off on, that sort of everybody agrees. And again, anybody marrying into the royal family, if you can't follow these issues, then you need to decide at that point you're not going to be a member of the royal family or something to that effect. And if you violate them, that your title can be pulled. I think it needs to be clear in this sort of modern era where there's, I think, more temptation than ever to wheel and deal in nefarious ways, to kind of eliminate that, let's say, temptation as much as possible, or make it clear that if you fall into that temptation, you will have some serious things to deal with and you won't get off scot-free. Because I think the problem, again, I've said this a lot, is that there are no consequences to certain actions really. And so it allows people to get away with quite a lot, or always think they'll get away with something. And that's part of the problem we have with the royal family right now. We also have Lizzie B, who gifted one Royal News Network membership. Why, thank you so much, Lizzie. So let's move on to sort of the next aspect, an interesting piece of discussion, which I actually sort of had mixed feelings on. So this is Sarah Ferguson. Apparently, Buckingham Palace in talks to find Sarah Ferguson a new home. Prince Andrew gives King ultimatum to grant him and his ex-wife separate royal residences. So basically the idea here is that Buckingham Palace is in talks to find a new home for Sarah. Aides representing the king are understood to have suggested options for Ms. Ferguson as part of multiple proposals to end Prince Andrew's lease at Royal Lodge. Prince Andrew and his ex-wife live at the 30-room Windsor home together, along with two corgis once belonging to the late Queen Elizabeth II. According to The Sun, Prince Andrew gave the king an ultimatum, issuing shocking demands that he should be given Frogmore Cottage for himself and Adelaide Cottage for Ms. Ferguson. Now, what I find funny, number one here in this story, is that I believe that Andrew moving to Frogmore Cottage has been an idea that's been floating around for a long time. It's been floating around for a really, really, really long time. So this idea that it's his idea, I find it kind of funny because I'm like, I believe that was other people's idea that he poo-pooed for a long time. So it's funny how things come around. It's like, oh no, I'll take Frogmore Cottage now. I'll take Frogmore Cottage. And I'm of two thoughts when it comes to Fergie getting Adelaide Cottage. Of course, she's a woman in her late 60s now. She's 66. She should be able to afford her own home. She actually bought two flats in London for $4 million each, just sold one. And she did sell it at a loss, and it was an investment property. She's rented them out. So I don't know exactly, you could say, how much, let's say, things she has. And so when it comes to Frogmore Cottage and Adelaide Cottage, there's two thoughts here. Number one, for Andrew, like, he is a royal. Like, getting a grace and favor home is pretty standard for, like, even peripheral way down the line members. And so I don't really have any issues with him getting Frogmore Cottage and then paying rent on it. I actually think it's really funny because I think it'll take Harry and Meghan off, that they had to pay like $2 million or something for their renovations. And it goes, Andrew, I find that really funny. Although I've always thought, guys, when it comes to Harry and Meghan and Frogmore Cottage, actually, it was Charles who paid that money. That's why he could take the home back so quickly, is that Charles actually paid the money to get them out of sort of the pressure of the government. I don't know if they ever paid him back or not. They should, if they borrowed that amount of money. But I think Charles is the one who actually paid for it. That's always been my opinion. So when it comes to Frogmore Cottage and Adelaide Cottage, the challenge with both of those homes and why those have been hard, let's say, to rent out, is that they're so close to Windsor Castle. So they are within really close to it to such an extent that it would be hard to give it to sort of anyone. So let's go ahead and take a look at the map, because maps are always helpful. I always find maps to be largely very, very helpful in explaining different things. So let's move over here. So we have Frogmore Cottage. So you can see Frogmore Cottage right here, quite a large home, not as big as Royal Lodge, but Windsor Castle is right here. So this is within sort of the bigger security perimeter. And Adelaide Cottage is over this direction here. So when it comes to making sure, let's say, because I still think I don't have really any issue with Andrew staying again in a Grace and Favor home. I think it sort of makes sense for him to be more within that sort of tighter security perimeter of Windsor Castle because of potential threats and those sorts of things. Frogmore House and Gardens is only accessed, I want to say once or twice a year. It has a very limited opening. So there's not really anybody who can get in this direction. And so people used to be able to, that's funny, it only has 4 stars. Nobody's been in there. People can walk these paths, but they usually, again, only open about like a very limited time per year. So Royal Lodge is sort of way down in this direction. It was further down than I thought it was. I don't know if I can find it just by kind of randomly searching here. But Royal Lodge is much more down in this direction. And so because of that, it's not quite as within sort of the security perimeter. So I know it's All Saints Chapel. So there you go. There's Royal Lodge. So Royal Lodge is all the way down here. So if you keep the All Saints Chapel, it's right next to it. So, well, you can't even see that now, but it's way, way down here. So I think it makes more sense to bring Andrew more up within the security perimeter just to keep him kind of sort of out of the way. Catherine and William's new home is somewhere around here. It's not too far, really. So that's not it, but that's a big house right there. So that is Forest Lodge, where they will be living in for basically the foreseeable future. And so because of that, they would be pretty close to Andrew. So again, it makes sense to sort of move Andrew closer to. Now, when it comes to Sarah, again, I have some mixed feelings about this because there's a part of me that says, I mean, she is a sort of peripheral member of the royal family. She is getting up in years. Yes, she should have a ton of money to fall back on. But at the same time, like, there's a part of me that's like, if she can pay the rent for Adelaide Cottage without issue, they're going to have a hard time renting that place out. If there's somebody in there who can upkeep it, that might be the best idea. That might be a good idea. Obviously, a lot of people will disagree. And so, a palace source on Sunday evening, to continue on with the article, denied that Adelaide Cottage, which the Prince and Princess of Wales and their children are about to vacate, was part of the negotiations. Buckingham Palace did not comment on the suggestion that aides had proposed or discussed options for Ms. Ferguson's living arrangements. So, this is Royal Lodge, so it is quite out of the way. Forest Lodge and Royal Lodge, I'm like getting them confused. But this is like a huge, massive, stately home. And so Andrew and Sarah could live there and live apart. And so I can't help but wonder because Frogmore Cottage is not like super tiny. Obviously, it's nothing in comparison to this. Andrew and Sarah have been so close. I can't help but think, why now all of a sudden can they not be close anymore? And I think it just reflects that they never really were, let's say, as close as they pretended to be in some ways. It was just merely a relationship of convenience. Sarah has taken advantage of, at least according to Andrew Lowney's book, Andrew quite a lot in that way. He's always been rather fascinated with her. There was even an article talking about how somebody did a little tour of the place because it used to be where the Duke of Windsor resided. And they talked about how there was like a little shrine to Sarah. So I think he has a little bit of a weird sort of obsession with Sarah. And so because of that, it's sort of become clear that once again, she was just sort of using him. No, it wasn't really that interested in him. So it does raise some really, really fascinating questions. So we'll see where this article goes. Again, there are challenges here because if the houses are, because Frogmore Cottage, Adelaide Cottage will both be empty. If there's a way to maintain them, that is a good thing because sometimes these places sit empty for a long time. So It all depends. Adelaide Cottage is also rather small, only has 4 bedrooms. So part of the reason Catherine and William are moving is that it doubles their bedroom space, which they sort of needed. They needed a bigger home. So it makes sense for them to move. I thought it would make more sense for them to live at Royal Lodge, but maybe, Prince William doesn't like the juju of his uncle and is like, no, you can get him out. I don't care. So I think it's definitely a possibility. Obviously, Catherine and William apparently are going to move out within the next, I want to say 10 days or so, 9 or 10 days. It's what's been speculated. I love how people know to like the day exactly when they'll move. But I think it's going to be a good move for Catherine and William. And we'll see what happens with Andrew. But it seems like he has come around to the idea that he will have to downsize. And if he does downsize, the British government or the Crown Estate will actually have to pay him some money, probably £500,000, to get him out of the lease. And that is because he paid a lot of money to renovate the home. So here's the problem too, which people don't seem to always kind of appreciate, which is that Royal Lodge was in really, really bad shape when Andrew got it. So to have somebody living there and taking care of it is sort of a huge, huge deal because these places are expensive to maintain because you have old wiring, you have a lot of rewiring, I'm sure you have updates to go about it and everything, and all these things that are attached to these sort of huge, mega old houses. So to have somebody there who can upkeep it is a good thing. So I'm curious who will live in Royal Lodge afterwards, or if they'll do something more creative with it. I don't think it'll really work, let's say, for like somebody mentioned, office spaces. I mean, there's a lot of grand rooms, so I don't think office space would necessarily be a good idea. My suggestion would be open it up for tours. That would be my suggestion. And I think that would be something that people would be really interested in. And again, when it comes to Adelaide Cottage and Frogmore Cottage, it's better for properties to be used than sit empty because when they sit empty, they tend to deteriorate. So, again, some people will hate this, but if Andrew's able to upkeep Frogmore, and if they gave Sarah Adelaide Cottage and she paid rent and maintained the upkeep of the property, I don't really necessarily see it as a super bad thing. But that, of course, again, is my opinion. But I don't know what they'll do without anybody there to sort of maintain. But again, I think Royal Lodge would make a fantastic, fantastic place for tours. I'd love to do a tour there. That would be awesome. So we do have another, of course, horrible storyline for Andrew, or headline for Andrew. Prince Andrew hosted Epstein, Maxwell, and Weinstein at Royal Lodge. So this is a picture. So we have Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein, and Harvey Weinstein. So of course, people are freaking out about the idea that Epstein was there and that Weinstein was there and everything. But I do have to say one thing. I believe it was Meryl Streep who once called Harvey Weinstein God. And she knew, and most of Hollywood knew exactly what this dude was doing. They all knew it. Nobody in a lot of ways. They feigned surprise. But Oprah Winfrey had her arm around Harvey Weinstein, and there were so many people who are more than willing to look the other way to get ahead. And I feel like that is sort of what happens with people like Epstein and Weinstein, is that if they are fairly successful, people tend to go like this and look the other way in their nefarious dealings. So is it a surprise that these guys interacted? No. Is it a surprise that Harvey Weinstein was at Royal Lodge? No. Why? Because he was at a heck of a lot of other important places, because he was one of the more prolific and successful producers in Hollywood. Not to mention, and I've got to say this, when I was many years ago on a royal forum, before I had this channel, the first time I ever heard about Harvey Weinstein potentially being sort of inappropriate with the women he cast in films and having a casting couch in the sort of the old term way is in regards to Cressida Bonus, because she got a role in a Harvey Weinstein film. That's the first time I ever heard of it. That was years before the story broke. So there were rumblings around the industry then, and I was aware at a royal forum that was the case. So all these people, this is just a reminder, because again, people want to target Andrew, and there's such an emotional, visceral response to Andrew. But both of these men, and Ghislaine Maxwell as well, interacted with some very important and powerful people, and people knew they weren't great people. They knew they were morally compromised. They knew different things. They might have even known about Jeffrey Epstein and the sex trafficking he did, Harvey Weinstein, and how he treated the women he potentially cast. And they all knew this, and they all looked the other way because wealth talks, influence talks, and people sometimes are more than willing to put their head down and ignore trouble that's coming their way because of who somebody is and what influence they had. And I think that is something to keep in mind. This is not an Andrew issue. I mean, Epstein interacted with so many big wigs, including sort of our next case, you could say, which is obviously Marius Borg Homeby. Obviously, you can see only the huge ads here. And we don't have a, there we go. There's Marius, this is CEO Korg, and this is Marius and his mother, Mette-Marit, she married the future king of Norway, and he was born before that wedding. But apparently, he has gone back into rehab treatments for his drug problems. So, if you're not aware of the Marius Borg Homeby case, he was arrested for domestic violence against his girlfriend, not girlfriend. There have been varying stories about that, but it might also be the translations. So, he was arrested for that. They went through, you could say, like his phone and various things, and story after story of him treating women incredibly poorly came out again and again and again and again and again. And nobody did anything. I also got to say as well, if you weren't aware, that Jeffrey Epstein actually did meet with his mother, Crown Princess Mette-Marit. So Mette-Marit, of course, has her own issues as well. She's had a lot of, there's a lot of questions over her years of partying, drug use, these sorts of things. So Marius and the Norwegian royals, you could say, are not immune sort of from this negative treatment, you could say. But now he's gone back into treatment once again, because again, he was like, when he was arrested, I believe they found cocaine, marijuana, and alcohol in his system. He already went to rehab last year. So he was arrested in August of 2024, arrested again in September of 2024, went to rehab in December of 2024, escaped from rehab at least one time in 2024, went back, left rehab in January of 2025, and now he's back in rehab. So this is probably in preparation for his trial, which is upcoming in February. And it's also sort of a great reminder that he hasn't gotten better. Like, all the articles and everything I've seen of him shows a guy who's still pretty out of control and doesn't seem to have really a great handle on sort of the damage he has caused. And his mom has been a huge part of cleaning up his messes over the years. So some of the stories are that he was having a big row with his girlfriend on the royal yacht. And I think the staff were sort of freaked out, and mommy, the crown princess, had to go down and deal with her son. The girls who were in relationships with Marius tried to tell the crown princess and her husband, the crown prince, who was not Marius's dad, but sort of pretty much his dad. He was raised a lot within their household, is that he was basically abusive and he had issues, and they sort of didn't seem to take it all that seriously from the cases I've read. So Marius has a lot of issues, and that he's going to rehab again tells me that it's probably, again, preparation for his case to kind of try to portray himself in the best light. But I don't think he's there recognizing the damage he's caused. I don't think he's out of the addiction cycle yet. I don't think, like Carol says here, I don't think he's hit rock bottom. He hasn't. I think maybe if he goes to jail, that might help, because that's a definite possibility. And there's also a new book, which I do want to reach out to the authors here. It's a Norwegian book, but it's White Stripes, Black Sheep. Talks a lot more sort of about this issue. And you can see right here, there's Marius giving the finger, and that is the book. So you have cocaine lines here talking a lot about his various issues and how his mom has been, I think, a real key part in trying to mitigate the fallout of his decisions. And we get to this point where there's a lot of questions over what the future will look like. And I just don't feel like it's going to look super, super good for him. So that is just the latest update on the Marius case. And I do want to get to Frederik, but we do have this queued up as well. So Queen Mary of Denmark is going to be traveling to Egypt in addition to King Philip of Belgium and King Philippe of Spain. And so what they are doing is they're actually going over and doing a visit to the Grand Egyptian Museum in Cairo. Now, what's kind of actually interesting, at least when it comes to Belgium especially, is that there's sort of a big personal connection to Belgium or Egypt because Queen, I want to say Queen Elizabeth was really, really interested in Egyptology and everything. And so she went and did some Egyptian exhibitions back in the day. And so I think that's really, really cool that they're sort of keeping up with the tradition, especially the King of Belgium going. Now, what's interesting as well is that King Felipe and Queen Letizia of Spain were recently in Egypt for a state visit. President Sisi of Egypt went to Denmark in December for a state visit, which I got pictures of because I was there to cover it. Very exciting. And then we also have, let's say, and I think Sisi also went to visit Belgium fairly recently. The president of Egypt has been sort of doing the rounds in Europe. And so we've seen him actually go on and do a lot of sort of visits and stuff. So I thought that was a really cool thing to bring up. But we also have sort of a serious case out of Denmark as well. And that is about sort of allegations that King Frederik is sort of the holiday king. And so it says, and this is, of course, is a translations that automatically translate from Google Translate. So this is not obviously full on everything. And it's not probably getting all the idiosyncrasies of the Danish language. But what's interesting about this is that it's talking about how Frederik must be careful not to give the impression that he is taking a lot of time off. It says Extra Bladett's political commentator Hans Engel. And I actually was not totally surprised by this because I have seen rumblings for years about Frederik not being as engaged as his mother or his wife, and definitely not his mother. So there were big questions when Queen Marguerite abdicated of, could Frederik sort of take over? Could Frederik be the one to lead? Would he get sort of in line? Because he had been a little bit, you could say, loosey-goosey and never had seen all that, let's say, focused on the monarchy. And I would generally say I see Queen Mary doing a lot more engagements than Frederik. And I've seen a lot of, Crown Prince Christian, he's regent this week. Crown Prince Christian, he's regent for 2 days. So here's what the article says. King Frederik already proclaimed it in his pamphlet, King's World. He would need to take vacations or so-called times outs, as he himself called them in a true CBS expression. I don't know probably what that means in the original Danish, but it says, and it can be said that Frederik has fulfilled this promise with his 9 foreign holidays this year alone. But King Frederik must be careful that his massive need for vacation and timeouts does not become a problem, according to, again, Extra Bladett's political commentator Hans Engel. I think so far it's going reasonably well, but I think it's starting to become a bit of a problem if you pay more attention to all the times he grants vacation than the days he accomplishes something. And he continues to say Frederik should be careful not to create the impression that he takes a lot of time off. If he first gets the impression that he doesn't care about his work, it will be very difficult for him to change that, states Engel, who also emphasizes that in his opinion, King Frederik has not missed or neglected anything that he, as king, should have participated in. So what this is saying is that, yes, some of this is problematic, but at the same time, he's still kind of hitting all the metrics that he should, but there's still a big question. So according to the official royal calendar, King Frederik has had 47 vacation days abroad this year. And that's abroad. That doesn't even count for trips within the borders of Denmark, as this points out. It also says that's almost 7 weeks of vacation. I don't know about you guys, but I do not get 7 weeks of vacation. The days are spread over 9 different trips. In general, it has not been the case, not even as Crown Prince, that he was overloaded. You can't say that with in any way. If you compare it to British royal family and presidents, their calendar is much fuller, explains Engel, pointing out that Queen Marguerite did not take so-called timeouts in the same way. All these weeks that he takes for himself, this has not been seen before, and it seems a bit strange to people who go to work every single day that there is suddenly a royal family that grants itself so many weeks of vacation. A king should be known for taking care of his duties and not for being a holiday king. And I have to say as well, guys, the holiday king issue comes up for King Willem Alexander as well. There are some Dutch Twitter accounts that really kind of go after him for that. And that sort of stemmed from him and his wife taking a vacation during the lockdowns and COVID to their home in Greece. And because basically all the Dutch people were told, hey, don't go on vacation, stay home or whatever. And the king didn't do it. And you kind of they had to do like a whole apology video for it. It was a big deal. So I thought this would be interesting because I like how they kind of break this down. And so January 10th through 11th, he was abroad. 17th through 19th, abroad again. 7th through the 16th in February, on vacation again. Crown Prince Christian was regent. So Crown Prince Christian feels like in some ways he's getting a bit of a more workout than his dad here. So we have, and then 21st to February 23rd, vacation. May 29th through June 1st. July 6th through the 20th. Frederik was on vacation again. Crown Prince Christian and Queen Margaret installed as regent and regents of the kingdom. So this is a longer vacation. So I'm curious where they were, because obviously Queen Mary's family, this might have been when they were in Australia. I would imagine this was when they were in Australia, because Queen Mary's family is from Australia. So it does take a little bit, obviously, of time to get out there and everything. But this also doesn't look super good either. September 27th through 30th, October 2nd through 5th. And this is just King Frederik. We don't have that many vacations with October 20th through 23rd with Frederik and Mary. So we have Frederik and Mary going on vacation together. Well, it doesn't say. But I believe this one was probably when they were in Australia. So they traveled differently though. But yeah, it's a lot of time where Frederik is out. So the royal house does not want to reveal where the holidays he takes abroad go, as it's considered private. And sort of the challenge here with Denmark as well, and other European countries, is that it could be abroad, but he just goes over to, let's say, the Netherlands, or he just goes to Poland or something. And that's technically considered abroad because he's outside the country. Maybe he goes to Sweden. Maybe he goes to Spain. Because part of the problem for Frederik, and this is, of course, concerning that he hasn't really totally learned his lesson yet, is that he went on a vacation without his wife in October of 2023. And people caught pictures of him going into a single woman's apartment alone and leaving the next morning. Now, they were allegedly friends. Allegedly, nothing happened. But was it a smart move to make? No. Was it dumb? Yes. Should you ever do that as a married man? No. That's a bad idea, because she was a woman. So there has been so much talk over the years, especially in the royal forums I watch, of Frederik not really wanting to work. So I feel like, unfortunately, this follows a well-established trend at this point. And I think it's a bit concerning, because I feel like everybody else in the Danish royal family is paying more attention and doing more things than Frederik is. And that's just never a good look. So, yeah. It's just an definitely interesting little side note there to kind of consider. So, guys, I'm curious to get your thoughts, especially if you are Danish. Let me know. Honestly, the Danes are one of my favorite royal families to cover in person, especially. I find the palace to be exceptionally nice and easy to deal with. And they do go on to say, when compared to Queen Marguerite, who has a huge presence still in Denmark, people love the Queen Marguerite. They love her. Daisy, they love her. There was a different sense of obligation to the Dane to tell the Danes where the regent was, whereas a new royal couple cherishes their holidays where the press has no access, and that is something they insist on, says Steen Olsen, before adding, you don't you don't think you owe it to the Danes to tell the royal what the royal couple is doing and where they are all the time. So she did have a holiday home because her husband was French. They had a holiday home in France, so they would invite the media to come and chat with them. But I do understand the concern of not knowing where they're going. I think that's like not knowing where they're going all the time is not a great look. There should be some transparency. Not maybe all the time, but sometimes. But Frederik was in Switzerland during February, I guess, to ski. That sort of makes sense. I understand that you don't want the press to go after you, but it's a bit strange that you don't get to know where the monarch is, but just get to know that they're gone, concludes Jacob. Yeah. And this is, again, so we got to the end. That is, I think, a bigger, of course, question for Frederik for sure. And I think one that he should take seriously. I sort of say the same thing about, let's say, Catherine and William sometimes. They seem to also take a lot of breaks at times. And sometimes they're not clear sort of what's going on. And, and people are like, oh, it's school holiday, so they don't work during the school holiday. Sometimes that works. And the issue with Frederik as well, I see, and some people, again, don't like when I point this out about Catherine and William. And of course, this has been a longstanding comment about Catherine and William as well, is that people think that once somebody becomes monarch, that the previous patterns will all change. The patterns that are established when they're the heir is most likely going to reflect when they are monarch. So, of course, again, a lot of the comments about Frederik have been or William have been in regards to being work shy and stuff like that. People think, again, that that'll all be fixed when he becomes king. Again, Frederik proves that that's sort of not the case. It's just a interesting thought to consider. So before we sort of finish up, let's watch a bit of the Princess of Asturias Awards. So this is something they do every year. Nor is the Princess of Asturias. And I find it so cool that they do this sort of stuff. I realize you can actually hear probably the music quite a bit. But I think this is sort of a beautiful ceremony. They recognize different people and their accomplishments. And so there is Leonor is a princess of Asturias right there. Her sister is Infanta Sofia, and they're her parents, King Felipe and Queen Letizia of Spain. And so this is something Felipe started way back many years ago when he was a prince of Asturias. And now, obviously, his daughter is the princess. So he still gives some awards, and you will see, we missed it there for a second, but in the red right there is Serena Williams. So they give awards for various issues. And then they do also talk about award things for like sports. That's what Serena got in. And yes, Louise says, no, we cannot not talk about the Danish state visit. I did forget about that. We will circle back here before the end to speak about that real quickly. But I did just want to make sure I mentioned the Princess of Asturias Awards. So I just wanted to make sure we did see them here. So I think the royal family does look amazing. The Spanish, I think, are the closest royal family to potentially losing the throne at one point, and they've been managed to really sort of get that changed up. And they have awarded Americans before, so Serena Williams is definitely not the first. They awarded Meryl Streep last year for her role in acting. So, and this is not a sort of Harry and Meghan award where you sort of pay to play. That's not really what the Princess of Asturias Awards is. It's just an award ceremony that is kind of designed to reflect and highlight people doing great work. So not everything is pay to play. I don't think this one particularly is. I don't think Serena Williams was like kind of, knew even anything about it to go, yeah, I'm gonna become the Princess of gonna get the Princess of Asturias Award. So I don't think that was the case. So anyways, guys, great to sort of highlight sort of the amazing work they're doing there. And so obviously people wanted to see, and we will share Queen Mary. Now, honestly, guys, I will have to say I've seen this look from Queen Mary before, and it's not one that I'm like love, but we do have Queen Mary in red here. So they are in Latvia. And I should show you guys as well. I think the Danes have an amazing website. So she is wearing the antique ruby and diamond tiara that she actually purchased. Because again, the Danes don't have a super big tiara collection. Well, they did at one point, and then a lot of it has sort of been sparsed out over the years. So that's been a little bit of a problem they had. And so they're going to do Estonia and Lithuania as well at some point, but right now it's just Latvia. And it's just a great way to sort of cement the relations between the two countries. So I do like her look here. Not one of my absolute favorites. And I know she's worn this before, but I can't quite remember when it was. But I think she does look great. And I did want to point out the Danish royal family because I think they honestly, when I talk about having sort of a great website and great web presence, this is something I criticize the Brits a lot for. And I think the Danes have really mastered it. So this is on the Danish version of the site. It's not on the English version. And so if I do the Danish version through Chrome, I get an automatic translation, which is great. But they have the picture up front. And then as you scroll down, of course you can't scroll back up again. They have the little thing that pops up there that says state visit to Latvia. They had a different picture up there earlier, so they're updating the picture as the event is going on. I love that. I think that's amazing. I think this is really, really cool. One of the things, again, that I feel like is a critique of a lot of the British royals especially, but some of the other royal families as well, is I feel like they're sort of woefully out of date when it comes to their websites. The Brits especially, I hate their website. I think this is awesome. Because again, the advantage now with technology is that you can really sort of kind of manage the press of an event better than you could before. So this is Frederik's speech at the event. And we have sort of a gallery of pictures. So there are like so many little pictures where they're going, what they're doing. This is day one. I sort of love this. Some of this is on social media as well, but I like how they can individually let you know what different things are. And we can see different aspects of the event. And we should get to the point here where this has been updated throughout the day. So we get the gala looks at some point here. We'll keep going until hopefully we get there. But look, this is so much. I don't feel like we get this really from any other royal. And then we get to the state visit, or sorry, the state banquet. And that is the end of the little thing. I think this is excellent. I would recommend any royal family sort of adopt this method or do something similar. Like, you don't have to copy and paste. That is never what I'm saying. But I think the Danes are a great inspiration of how to manage your website. So I would suggest anybody who wants, let's say, a different way to go about things, I think that is, or wants to update, I think the Brits should follow very much the Danish approach. I think that's actually the best way, one of the best ways. So guys, that is it for the latest edition here of the Crown Report. And so we do want to wrap up a little bit with some super chats and some other questions. We have Team Wales who gave a super chat saying, just getting here. Hope everyone is doing well. We are. Thank you so much, Team Wales. And we do have Monica Willier giving from Canada. Oh, Canada says, I believe they should have certain things in place to be in the line of succession, being born and raised, plus going to school. Yes. So I have advocated as well, which I think is kind of funny that there's been big rumors that Prince Harry wants his son to go to Eton. There is a stipulation in the Swedish monarchy that you must be raised and educated in Sweden to remain in the line of succession and to have Swedish titles. They gave Princess Madeline a bit of leeway for that for a couple of years because she lived with her family in Florida. But I do like that because if you are going to have a title from a country, you shouldn't be living in that country if at all possible. Now, sometimes it's not possible. You know, we have some monarchies that have been overthrown and prevented from going back to their country. The Greeks were kind of an example of that for a period of time. But when it comes to the Brits, like, why do you have two kids wandering around California that they're going to call themselves Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet? That's just dumb. They don't have any connection to the monarchy. Their dad doesn't. They're not raised in it. Their uncle is not the future king, but Marcus, apparently. So it doesn't make any sense to me. So Lori Dixon became a YouTube member as well. Why, thank you so much, Lori. I really, really do appreciate it. And I hope you enjoy it so much. All right. So RJ says, copy their website, not their king. Very true. Very, very true. So MFM6591 says, if everyone's finances are opened up for review, only those that are dirty will be caught up in this. So I didn't want to respond to this because that's not necessarily true. Again, when it comes to witch hunt, if there's like a fanaticism behind things, we have seen where people who were totally innocent got caught up in something because, oh, something maybe looked sketchy for half a second, but it never was. It's just how people interpreted it based on sort of a fanaticism. That's like the best way I can put it. I mean, you even have just general the Salem witch trials as an example of that. So I think my personal opinion is that unless there is a reason to, there's no reason to go rooting around in Beatrice and Eugenie's bank records. You will find something that people complain about, which really has nothing to do with anything and might be completely and utterly above board. But because everybody's looking to twist everything in a negative way, I don't think they're going to get basically people looking at things in the right way for them. There are going to be people who are wanting to root around and destroy them. And I just don't think that's particularly healthy, really. Now, again, if there's something connected to Andrew and they're rooting around in Andrew's financials, sure, because I think Andrew's financials definitely need to be rooted into because of his role as special trade envoy. I think that's definitely true. But I'm sure you'll find things that you don't like in Catherine and William's finances if you root around them long enough. I mean, people were upset that Queen Elizabeth had an offshore account in like the Cayman Islands. Yeah, rich people do things that other people don't like them doing, but it helps them save money. And so they do them and people complain. So there will be people who complain about just about anything. I don't think you need to go hunting for something unless you have something in particular you're hunting for. And I don't think we do here. I think it's just a blanket. We need to go over all their finances because we're going to find something. But I don't think anybody has the right to upend somebody's life just in the hopes of finding something without really any hard evidence of anything. I don't think anybody would appreciate or enjoy that. So that's just something, again, to keep in mind. So MF also says the York sisters cannot get a pass without review now. Can't happen. I sincerely hope they're clean. I think they're fine. I think they're fine. Montana says, thanks, Brittany. You're looking absolutely lovely today. Why, thank you. Marcella says, I'll have to watch the replay. Came in late. Yes. So we will go ahead and this will be eventually uploaded onto the Crown Report YouTube channel, and then we'll cut out the various segments and put them up there as well. So Ritz says, Princess Madeline looks very serious and tense in pictures and videos. She does not smile as much. Well, I think sometimes she's a little nervous and stuff like that. But yeah, she can have, she sometimes does in pictures, and I don't know, be interested and curious to like really capture it on video. She kind of like does this sometimes. And I've seen that, like 15 years ago. So this is not something new for her, but she just may not want to all the time. So MFM says, you keep stressing they're not working royals, then why are they princesses still? Because they were born princesses. A title of prince or princess does not mean you're a working royal. Yeah. Susan says, have a great day. Yeah. Becky says, because their grandmother was on the crown when they were, or on the throne when they were born, due to the 1917 letters patent. Yes. So they deserve it. Lizzie says, Miss Brittany, did you write Welda Minland to see if they could send you a PR skin package for an honest review? I haven't yet, but I do need to, because I do want to review it. I like to give things an actual review. And so, yes, I will hopefully be able to do that. If not, hopefully at some point I shall get to Scandinavia and I will be searching high and low for Minland items to give it a fair review. Liberty says, make sure everyone likes and shares. Thank you. Chantal says, the Dutch royal family. Oh, yes, I meant to talk about this. So many things. The Dutch royal family celebrated 750-year birthday of Amsterdam. There are beautiful pictures of Maxima and Amalia. Yes, there are. And I do want to point out one thing here, which is super duper duper cool. And I love this when royal ladies do this. Now, this doesn't always work out how it should, but I do absolutely love this. And I think this really, really works, which is we have 3 generations, guys, of women within the family wearing the same dress. Queen Beatrix, now Princess Beatrix, in 1981, Queen Maxima in 2014, and Princess Amalia in 2025. And I think they all look great in this dress. And they just look all so lovely, so different and interesting. And I'm really excited that we see sort of this continuation. I really like how we've heard a lot about how Amalia is very, I think, interested in the history of her family and history of her country and everything, really interested in the history of the jewelry and stuff. And so I feel like she has a great appreciation for sort of the role she has. And I just don't think every royal does. I don't think all the royals do necessarily. And I'm so excited that she gets to do so much as a working royal. She is one of the older of the new generation, but I just really love that we see her working really consistently. I think that's a great thing to see. You know, she's doing state visits and all this stuff, which, like, again, just grows her as a royal. And so hopefully, like, Princess Estelle, I think, has a great love for like royal duties and the royal family and everything and what she gets to do. Just like her mother, Crown Princess Victoria. Even if the event is mundane, I feel like Crown Princess Victoria enjoys every minute of it. And I love that. And so I'm just so excited that Amalia gets to do that. And so that they were all there to celebrate the 750th birthday of Amsterdam, which is crazy. It's so cool. Her Majesty says the Daily Mail reported Andrew and the girls are telling friends King Charles wants to earmark Royal Lodge as a future dowager residence for Camilla if she outlives King Charles. I did hear that as well. And that could be quite interesting. I mean, I guess, but she does have her own property too. But again, being within the security apparatus of Windsor Castle overall is sort of nice to keep people somewhat safe. But yeah, I think that's an interesting thought. But we'll see if that happens. Disco 1000 says Blood Diamond Association should be transparent, whoever it is. I don't know if we have any of that. Betsy says, I think we need to remember there is a difference between unethical and illegal. Exactly. Great point, Betsy. There is a difference between unethical and illegal. A lot of what Andrew did was unethical. Whether it was illegal is a big question. And obviously that wildly extends to the girls as well. And I just don't think they were engaged in anything that unethical. But yeah, we'll see. Liberty says, if the candle smells like her wedding, does it mean the musty smell of the church where Meghan wanted air fresheners? This, of course, is about Meghan's new product launches. I'm going to have to do a video on that because, oh my gosh, I have thoughts. Sir Squirrel a Lot says, I'm not a huge fan of the Yorks, but the princes have always been non-working royal family members. They have right to their private, financial, and personal life. Yes, they do. I agree. I love Amalia, says Arde, my favorite future queen. She is lovely, I think. Lizzie B says they look beautiful. They do. Carol says, I'm glad the dress works on all 3 generations. Yeah, I did see a comment that says it's kind of cool that the dress is sort of stands out and is unique, but like works with all of them. And I think it definitely works with somebody who has like a strong personality as Maxima does. Jane Bailey says, why does Amalia's younger sister never smile? She looks like she doesn't care. She's really trying to do the pout. I think it's kind of an immature, I want to be an influencer kind of. That's what I think it is. So I'm hoping she grows out of it at some point and sort of grows up a little bit. But she is only in her very, very early 20s. So a little grace can be extended. Lady Amber says it's great they all fit the dress. Yeah. And they all have the tall body for it. Actually, Beatrix is fairly short. You can actually see for Beatrix, it hits the ground. It does not hit the ground for Maxima or Amalia, just because they're a lot taller. DS says, can you tell us about the jewels that were stolen? So I actually have a whole video on Royal Fashion News about the stolen jewels from the Louvre. And I did want to do a quick update here, and this is a great time to do that, as well as they have arrested 2 people. Both of them were trying to leave the country, one to Algeria, one to Mali. So they are dual citizens. So again, I think it raises some interesting questions about sort of immigration in Europe. Because sometimes I think some of these things happen, not all the time, but some of the time because of, let's say, how should I put this? Because of a lack of cultural appreciation. Some people won't even try things like because they appreciate the cultural relevance of it because it belongs to their country. But if you're a dual citizen and you have more allegiance to Mali or Algeria, you might be more interested in doing that. So I think that's definitely something to consider, but they're trying to keep things pretty close to the vest. And again, those criminals made a lot of mistakes. So they were able to capture the guys. They had known like criminal records, they were known robbers, connect them through some of the DNA evidence they left behind. So I have better hopes for this than the kind of smash and grab at the Dresden Green Vault. And the Dresden Green Vault, I feel like is a bit different because I think they got away like much better because they did it at nighttime. I don't think the guards were kind of aware super quickly. And so it definitely is something where I'm really hopeful that they capture everything and it's all in good shape. But in their haste to sort of destroy the evidence, they might break stuff down too quickly. But the disadvantage of that from just simply a criminal perspective is especially emeralds are really soft stones. And so if you're rushing to get it done, you'll actually cause more damage, which can result in less profit. And they're still too hot to fence. And so, like, you just need to like kind of destroy everything, but then also you're destroying any profit you would really make off of any of this. So I feel like in some ways, so much of this is pretty good. And so I'm hopeful that because if they destroy too much, they're not going to get anywhere, that they don't end up destroying that much. But we shall see. Uh, Edna Ferns says they might not be working roles, but they have benefited from the royal connections and have enjoyed the privileges. They are corrupt and greedy as their parents. I would say no. Again, Peter and Zara have also very much financially benefited off their royal connections. They have. That's just reality. I don't know if Zara would have gotten the brand deal she has if not for her connection to the royal family. Again, Peter Phillips, he did a commercial in China based off his connections to the royal family or some sort of ad. He sold his photos to Hello Magazine because of his connections to the royal families. A lot of them financially benefit from it. And the York girls are not nearly the way the other members have, or Zara and Peter have in a lot of ways. So I would say that's sort of an inaccurate statement. Carol says, I love how Amalia accessorized with Aquazera pumps. Yes. Gretchen says, is there any one born royal who doesn't somehow benefit? The challenge seems to be where the draw the lines. Exactly. And this is the same thing. Obviously, there's a lot of issue with Madeline, I guess, within Sweden and her kind of deal with Welda and Minlin and everything. And there's a lot of criticism for that. But it's like, you can't not in some ways. She was born the daughter of a king. She can't like stop that association. She has been famous since she was born. Like, she can't do anything about that. So she had this idea. She wanted to follow this business strategy. Her husband's a finance guy, and so he could help her do it. Like, a lot of people had an issue with that. I don't see any issue because, like, what do you want her to do? Sit on her butt for the rest of her life? Woman wants to start a business. I feel like we should support a woman starting a business. And so I feel like it's almost impossible for women or anyone within a royal family to not somehow financially benefit from it. It's basically impossible, guys. So KN Kiernine, thank you so much for the super chat, says, I disagree. Robbery happens all the time. It does, but kind of going after jewels of historic value, like people tend to appreciate the historical connections. I mean, honestly, yes, they may have gotten some super nice pieces, but they're going to be a pain in the butt to fence because you have to recut them, which diminishes its value. You'd be much better off actually robbing a regular jewelry store, to be quite honest, because you don't really have to worry quite as much, you could say, in some ways, although there might be like laser tracking and whatever. Like, this is just sort of a pain in the butt. So Arde says, if you mean Alexia, yeah, I may have said the wrong name. I kind of agree. Yeah, she wants to do this. I'm hoping she grows out of it. She's again only in her early 20s, guys. So hopefully she does. Lizzie B says, I think the pointy shoes give something extra. I like it. I do like the look of pointy shoes. I just have such a trouble with it. Sir Squirrelot says Queen Camilla will return to her home. The king bought the property next door for her, and I thought at the time it was a setup for security and productivity. Probably, but we shall see. So, yeah, Carol says, I think the FBI was involved in pursuing the thieves. I think the French authorities asked for the U.S. help. If they did, cool. We'll see. Sir Squirrel Lot says your jewelry coverage was great. Why, thank you. I have a strong passion for real jewels. I feel so, I wanted to see him again. I'm so mad. Karen with an I says Madeline was a party princess when younger. Nice to see she has settled down and at least is trying to do something concrete. I 100% agree. I 100% agree. KN Kiernan says Zara and Peter aren't holding titles. The issue is the titles. It's really not. Again, they've all financially benefited from their connection with the royal family. Titles or not. John says, thank you for posting me today. And then, so yeah, that was kind of weird. Alice O'Donnell says, I feel so sorry for the York girls. None of this is their fault. And no matter what the future holds, they're never going to escape this. And it isn't fair. It's not. It's really not. But again, like they have to blame their parents. Like that's the only way. And their parents are at fault. But at the same time, I do acknowledge them for trying to be, let's say, gracious with their parents. Because that's how it should be. So we'll go ahead and end on this super chat with DS, who asks, are the jewels worth more taken apart or intact? So the reality with the jewels is, which again is kind of why it's dumb to steal jewels of this magnitude, is that a lot of the value for the pieces, individually, of course, are very valuable, but the big value comes from their historical connections and their old gem mine cuts. So because of these historic connections, that is what makes them truly, really valuable. The disadvantage is, of course, is that to fence them, because they are old mine cuts that are sort of easily identifiable in a lot of ways. Like people would look at it going, where did you get these? These are old cuts. Like we know there was the safe. So it would be hard to fence them. And yes, they could funnel them through certain things, but it would still be kind of hard. They would have to cut them down. And to cut them down diminishes the value. So you take away, because it would basically destroy the historic connection. So when you destroy the historic connection, actually, I would imagine, in my personal opinion, like the amount of net worth of the jewels probably gets cut in half at the very least, if not more. Because again, the value comes from their historic connections. That's where the true big value comes. This was worn by Napoleon's wife. This was worn by the this was worn by King Louis XIV. Once that jewel is unrecognizable and that piece becomes unrecognizable, you lose a huge chunk of that initial value, because the value comes from, in huge part, their historic connections, not just the gemstones themselves. And again, to actually fence it, so there's two pink diamonds in the reliquary brooch. You'd have to cut those down, which diminishes their worth. And you cut out the Louis XIV connection. Oh, they're just pink diamonds. And yes, they're worth a lot, but are they worth as much as what they would be worth if they were a fully intact part of the reliquary brooch? No. So I would imagine, and this is again a very, very conservative estimate. And then you have all the costs of melting things down, cutting things down, all these sorts of things. You have the trouble with some things might break, some things might not be as in good condition as you think they are. All these sorts of factors together, they might get, let's say, at the most 5 to 10% of what the pieces are actually worth. That's the crazy part. That might be, of course, a very, very conservative estimate on my part, but so much of that is what is accurate. So Lizzie B says members live stream. So that'll be next week, because we did it last week. So we will do it next week. And Lady Saucy Ming says, Brittany, have you looked into the Les Lotho crown and tiara? Not really. No, I'm not as interested in them. I don't even really look into the Asian or Middle Eastern tiaras. I pretty much stick to just Europe at this point. I don't even have enough time for Europe. So that's kind of why why I go in that direction. Alice says, I agree. St. Edward's sapphire and the imperial crown is cracked and not worth as much as a jewel, but because it is believed to be connected to St. Edward, it's effectively priceless. Exactly. So much of the pieces come from their historic connection is what makes them actually really, really worth it. Susan says the thieves would have likely broken them up immediately, unsellable in their original form. Any reputable jeweler will be able to note the age and potentially sketchy provenance of the stones. So, actually, breaking them down immediately would not necessarily be how they would go about it. We do have the case in the Dresden Green Vault where pretty much they got all the pieces back to intact, because if you set up a huge operation to cut down stones, like that's going to take up a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of energy. And you would prefer to do that. It would be smarter to do that without all the world's eyes on you. And so, I mean, it depends. Again, they could rush to break them down to sell them to avoid the eyes of the police. But at the same time, like they're hoping to make a huge profit off this. And so, they may actually be keeping them kind of in the status they are right now, because to get the most value out of the pieces, you'd have to actually have a fairly long-term like way to do that. So even right now, fencing any jewelry, I think would be too high a price. Like if you're anywhere in Europe, everybody's looking for stones like that. Now, granted, they know they'll be cut down, but if there's any weird stones coming up anywhere, it's so fresh in everybody's mind, they would immediately be called into question. So at this point, you would have to wait a little bit. Meta Autumn says, usually the kind of thieves are commissions. They already have someone who's going to buy the stones. They do have somebody who's going to buy the stones, but it all depends. Again, they do have to break them down. There are questions. So yeah. Sir Squirrelaw says, interesting question. Any chance they would attempt to ransom them back? That would be an interesting thought. So ABC says the diamond market has also crashed due to lab-grown diamonds. That's probably true. Although they're worth more, but still, like, again, anything that comes that sort of goes way out would have to be it would take time. Marjorie says, do you think they'll go to private collector to be kept in secret? No. I mean, it could be, but that would be really, really rare. Most likely they want to make a good portion. And the thing is, if you buy them and they've been fenced and you're just keeping them in hopes that they gain in value and you can resell them, you can't resell them. They're hot property. It doesn't necessarily work. But if I do find anything lying around, guys, I will let you know. So guys, thank you so much for tuning in to this latest edition of the Crime Report. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching. And we shall speak about this again very, very soon next week, same time, same place. So bye, guys.